Welcome home. How you doing, Stephanie?
Hey there, Jamie. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I wanted to ask you a couple questions today, if we could just jump right in,
Let's do it.
about job history. So when people are qualifying for a loan, obviously you need to know about their employment, right?
Right.
The theory out there, or what a lot of people assume, is that you have to have the same job for 2 years. Do you hear that from people?
I do, and I try to correct that every time I hear it. You have to have a 2 year employment history. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in the same job. You can have changed jobs, especially if you're going upward in pay, staying in similar industries. But if you're going backward in pay or doing something wildly different, changing frequently, or having gaps between jobs, it's going to raise some questions. But if that's a myth we need to bust, it does not have to be 2 years on the same job.
Okay, I think that that is a myth that we need to bust. I feel like I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
But I do want to give a disclaimer to this video as well, that any individual question anyone has, they should just call you, right? Or call their lender and get clarification for their specific scenario.
Absolutely, because the answer is usually it depends.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Now, if somebody has, let's say they're, in my example, I used to be a teacher, right? And I taught for more than 2 years. I had that job history, but I did take maternity leave. So if there's like a leave of absence or some sort of gap for a reason like that, how does that impact their qualification?
So it depends
Yeah.
on a couple of things. Leaves are actually fine. If it extends past when you're going to actually make that first payment, and your income is not going to be fully restored until after that, we may have to use a reduced qualified amount depending on if you've been getting PTO pay, or if it's short-term disability, that's a lesser amount. It's okay to have leave, and as long as your regular income is going to be kicked back in by the time you make your first payment on a mortgage, it's actually okay. It's something we can work with, but there are little nuances to the leaves of absence. So again, it's talking about individual situations.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then another thing that we're seeing a lot right now, times are a little tougher right now, and a lot of people are working many jobs. So,
Mm.
can somebody that has like several part-time jobs, or maybe one full-time job and some side gigs or whatever, but if their income is sort of made up by different pieces, how does that look on your end?
It depends.
You're gonna hear
Part
that a lot today.
it sadly is kind of always the answer. Full-time jobs, especially longer than 2 years, those should be counted, especially if they're W-2 paid positions. Part-time positions are a little bit like you have to have 2 years on the same one. It has to be verified from HR that you're going to still be getting this number of hours. It is likely to continue. So part-time jobs we don't take as seriously. Part-time and seasonal are a little bit difficult to work with unless you have kind of a long-running history with multiple part-time jobs being your steady sources of income.
Okay, that's really a good point. Seasonal jobs, especially, we're recording this in December, so I'm sure that applies to a lot people
Well, lots
right
of
now.
golf jobs are seasonal
Yeah, that's
too.
true.
Yeah.
And so basically, if something wasn't under or was under 2 years, then maybe you just can't count that as part of their income.
Correct. We can't count that as income for them to qualify on. But in my mind, I'm like, please put all of that towards all of your debts and save some.
Hmm.
You
That's,
know,
yeah, that's
if
great.
you're getting the side income for extra money, we hope it's going to help out in your qualification in the long run, but not on income that we can count on. Stability and regularity are factors that we have to verify on all income.
That makes sense. And I think I've said this in another video, but I always try to tell buyers when they start getting frustrated with the process, or, I always try to tell people, even though, it's this bank, right, that's loaning you the money, if you really think about, if your friend wanted to borrow $200,000 or $300,000 from you, you'd probably want to do everything you could to verify that they're going to be able to pay you back. So I try to
Absolutely.
remind people that's all that you guys are doing, is just verifying that they're going to pay you back, because
Yeah,
it's a hefty sum that they're borrowing in a lot of cases.
it is. And people feel like, oh my gosh, you're asking me so many questions. Well, we are getting ready to give you a huge chunk of money.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I actually got this question recently. So, you and I do a lot of events together and build community, and actually got a buyer that we're currently working with from some of the events that we've done together. And this particular gentleman called and said, hey, I know we've already signed the buyer's representation with you. We've already talked to Stephanie. So we're in process. What would happen if I changed my job? So I thought, well, it depends. Give Stephanie a call. My answer is always, that's a lender question. That's not in my wheelhouse. So I sent him your way. But how would you answer that sort of in general?
Yeah. Well, so in that particular situation, it was another company, similar line of work. He would be getting a pay increase. I'm like, go, take that job. We're totally fine. It gets different in situations like, well, for an example, I had a situation earlier this week. This borrower is a nurse, and he asked the question, I really want to take a contract nursing position. Can I do that? And my immediate response was, well, same hospital system, like, where are you going? And he went on to expound, well, contract means travel.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that situation, it's different because travel nurses are paid, a lot of what they make is actually per diem expense money. So if they've got a travel position but live reasonably or live cheaper, so their income is really elevated by that per diem housing expense, which cannot be counted.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
That is actually non-taxable income. That's meant to be a reimbursement. That's not salary. That's not guaranteed pay. It is guaranteed under their contract, but the way lenders look at it, per diem is not,
it's kind
income.
of already allocated to something.
Exactly. The assumption is you're spending that money, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I had to say, no, you need to get moved, you need to get kind of stable and then pursue that job. So, basically, if you're moving from one W-2 position to another, we should have no problems. If you're moving from state to state, of course, that's a given. You're going to have no problems. Yeah. If you're changing structures, like if you are a W-2 employee and you want to go to a 1099 or self-employed situation, stop right there. You're not doing anything for 2 years.
Okay.
Maybe one. And so there's always kind of nuances to some of them. But yeah, you can change jobs. We just need to talk about what that new job looks like.
Okay. That actually leads me perfectly into my next question that I was going to ask, which was just going to be sort of the different type of workers. And especially right now, we're seeing increased number of freelance workers and people that may not have, one employer all the time. How can they buy a house?
It's going to take time. If they're working different, sporadic, moving around a lot, everything's considered part-time. That's difficult to qualify on, but your tax returns are going to be where that is. I did have one borrower. She had a W-2 position, but she also did freelance work in her line of work, like editing. She had 2 years worth of tax returns on that, and that money had increased in that second year. That's usable income. But self-employed, freelance, gig workers, a lot of people are calling it, you do have to have history and you do have to have solid tax returns. The extra thing to be cautious of that, if you are doing freelance or gig work, Don't write everything off. People are like, "Ooh, I make decent money, but there's so much overhead. I write things off." That can sometimes work against you on
Oh,
if you're really trying to get your income down low, that can sometimes work against you. So questions for your tax person, questions for your mortgage lender, both in that situation.
right. That's a really good point, because similar with people that work on gratuity, a
Yes,
lot of times they may be trying to show that they make less than what they really do, but if you're trying to buy a house, you don't want to,
right.
you need
Yeah,
to show that income, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I keep hearing you say about step up, like if your income goes up, but I'm glad that you pointed out that nursing client or borrower of yours, because increased money doesn't always mean that you can qualify more easily, is what I heard you say, right?
Exactly. You never want to assume that that's going to be a good move, because in that situation, the hourly rate was actually going to go down. So we could still qualify him, but we would only be able to use that hourly rate, which looks smaller than what he's making now. But overall, it's going to be more money in his pocket. We
Yeah.
just, lenders don't see it that way.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what about if you are in the same job, but you're switching your hours? So let's say you're a full-time employee, but you're going down to part-time. How does that work?
That happened to me last week also. She had been with the same job for about 4 years, and just as a decision for her family, made
Right.
the choice to go to part-time. But her part-time hours are guaranteed at a certain amount, and the intention is for her to keep working there. Because she had the 2 years history, and the part-time is going to be able to continue on, and it's the same company, we are going to be able to use that. But generally, if you're changing from a full-time to a different part-time job, that's not going to work.
Okay. So within the same job, then
Hmm.
you're basically looking for patterns, right? So that you can predict
Correct.
income.
Stability, regularity, yes.
Do you have any examples of jobs that are a little bit more, or types of jobs that are a little bit more difficult to qualify? Or is it really the ones that we've kind of talked about?
That would be mostly the ones that are part-time, freelance. Salary W-2 positions are the easiest thing in most cases, but it's freelance. It's things with different pay structures like nursing. Truckers actually can be a little bit iffy when it's by mile and it may not be guaranteed. But if there's history of it, the history comes into more play when it's something kind of weird like that. But truckers have a little bit of an interesting time too.
So I think that the theme of all of this is that you know
It
what you're doing.
depends.
And so when it comes to any borrower, really the best thing to do is just to stay in tight communication with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Let's talk about everything. Tell me the things that you don't even think will matter, because they may matter. And when I start asking a ton of questions, it's not a mistrust. It's a let's put all of the pieces together, paint this beautiful picture so that you get qualified to buy a home.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
goal. And so that we can create more homeowners. Um,
Absolutely.
Another thing I always tell my clients, I always try to word it that if you're making any change to your financial picture, call your lender first. And
At all.
I make sure to specify that even if you think it's an improvement, call your lender first. Because even if it's just moving money, I mean, this is a little off topic, but moving money from account to account, there's just so many things that my answer is always call the lender, run it by. This is one of those cases where it is better to ask permission than forgiveness, because
Always. Great point. Yeah, I like that.
yeah. So, well, I appreciate you clarifying some of those frequently asked questions. I get asked that stuff all the time. So, I think it's important information to get out there. We always say that information is power.
Yeah.
And of course, if you have further questions or if you have a specific scenario that you are curious about, then feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we'll get you in front of the right answers.
And do feel free to share a video with somebody that you know is looking. Please hit the like or subscribe. We would love our YouTube channel to have some more love.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.
Well,
Talk to you soon.
Sounds good.